repeated row 2 all the way to where I'm going to split for the sleeves for the size that I am making. This length right here that you have crocheted so far is a length from the bottom of your cardigan right to under your arm where the sleeve is going to start. So if you wanted to adjust that, you could just add or take out rows as needed if you wanted it a different length. So right now we're going to go ahead and do the split for the sleeves. So what we're going to do is you're only going to be working part way across the row, and we're just going to be working just this section, which is going to be one of the front panels of our cardigan, because it will fold over like this. Both sides will fold over, and this will be our cardigan, and we'll have the space for the sleeves up on the top. So we're only going to be working part way across our row. So I suggest looking at the pattern and seeing how many stitches you're going to be working across for this first panel, and then placing a stitch marker right after that. So I put a stitch marker. I'm going to be working across 11 half double crochet V-stitches, and then I put a stitch marker right after that. So let's go ahead and get started with our next row. It's going to start just like our other rows did. I'm going to start with a chain 2 and turn my work. And I'm going to work that half double crochet V-stitch all the way to my stitch marker. So for this size I'm making, I'm just going to be doing 11 half double crochet V-stitches. So there's my 11 half double crochet V-stitches, and now on my next V-stitch I'm just going to half double crochet in this first stitch right here, because this is the end of my row for now. This is all I'm working. That's it. So I'm only working part way across. We're just going to be working this front panel right here, and then we will rejoin and do a center panel, and then do the last panel so we can fold and sew for a cardigan shape. So that is the end of my row. I'm going to chain 2, and I'm going to turn my work. And I'm just going to work that same row 2 repeat that we worked for the rest of our sweater. So I'm going to work a half double crochet V-stitch all the way across. So there is my row of half double crochet V-stitch, and then I'm going to work my final half double crochet in that turning chain. And then that's all we're going to be doing for this section. Go ahead and repeat row 2, just this portion of your sweater, for the correct row for the end of the sweater for the size that you're making. And again, we are just working this portion right here. So as I chain 2 and turn, I'm only working to here. So here I have my first front panel is finished. So I went ahead and fastened off and left that end there. I'll probably use it to weave it in when I fold and I sew the front panel then to the back. So now I'm going to do this middle section, which is the back of my sweater. And real quick before I forget, this length right here from where you started this front panel to here, this is your armhole depth. So if you wanted to change this, you could add or take out rows as needed if you wanted to change this armhole depth. But remember, whatever amount of rows you do in this section, you need to do in the last 2 sections. They need to all be the same amount of rows. So now we're going to do this middle section. So I went ahead and put another stitch marker right after the amount of V-stitches I'm going to be crocheting for the middle section right here. So what I'm going to do is we're going to join in this V-stitch right here. take out this stitch marker, and at the end of this row, this is where I did that last half double crochet. So I'm going to go ahead and join right here in the next half double crochet of the same V-stitch. So for this row, I did my V-stitches across to here, and then I half double crocheted in the first half double crochet from this V-stitch. I'm going to join to this one right here. So I'm going to insert my hook here. Let me find my yarn. I'm going to pull it through, and I'm going to do my chain 2. And that's the beginning of this middle section. I'm not connecting it to this at all. I want an opening right here because this is where my armhole is going to be. So this is its own section separate from this. So here's my chain 2, and now starting in this next V-stitch, I'm going to do my half double crochet V-stitch. And I'm going to do that all the way across to my stitch marker. So here I have worked my half double crochet V-stitches all the way to my stitch marker. So now I'm just going to double crochet in the very next half double crochet from this next V-stitch. And that is the end of this section. So now I'm going to change, so I have this whole section here unworked, and the amount of stitches on this side matches the amount of stitches here, because this is our front panel. This that we just did was the back, and then this part left unworked will be the second front panel. So I'm stopping here, and now I'm going to chain 2, and I'm going to turn my work. And I'm going to work all the way across. So my chain 2 is my first stitch. So I'm going to half double crochet V-stitch across, and I'm going to do this all the way to where I first joined in this middle section. So here I've worked my half double crochet V-stitches all the way across to where I initially joined in this section. So I'm going to half double crochet in that chain 2, and you'll see a space right here where the first section was made, and then here's our second section coming up. It's going to be the exact same. It's going to be the exact same length as this one, and you want this space the whole way because this is going to be our armhole. So go ahead and continue repeating that same row 2 all the way across to here where this section ends. So here I have completed this middle section of the top part of my sweater. This middle section is the width across the back of my cardigan. So now I'm going to do that same thing right here where I'm going to join my yarn in this V-stitch right here and complete this last section. And again, I don't want it to touch. I want this space open because this is going to fold like this and sew across the top, and then this is going to be the armhole. So I'm going to do this section again on this side, and these two outside sections should be the same because this is the front, one of the front panels, and then this side right here will be the other one. So here is that last half double crochet from our middle section, that first row. So here's that V-stitch for the last half double crochet. Here's the second, so here's part of the V-stitch and then the other leg of the V-stitch. I'm going to insert my hook right here, and this is where I'm going to do my chain 2. I'm going to bring my yarn over and join and chain 2. Pull that a little bit tight and move it out of my way. And now I'm going to half double crochet V-stitch here in the next chain 1 space. And then I'm going to work that across to the end of my row. This is my last V-stitch, and then I'm going to do my last half double crochet in that chain 2. And now I'm going to chain 2 and then turn. And then work my regular repeat all the way across. So again, I'm just going to half double crochet V-stitch all the way across till I get to the end of this last section. Here's my first chain 2 from that first row where I joined. That's where my last half double crochet of this row is going to go. And you're just going to continue repeating that until you reach the last row, which is the same height as your other 2 sections. So here I have completed all 3 sections for the top portion of my cardigan. I'm going to need scissors, I'm going to need a yarn needle and some stitch markers so that we can go ahead and do the sewing. So I'm going to fold these pieces, these front pieces, like this. And you will have a little bit of a gap right here, but we're going to be adding a collar, so we'll fill in that gap later on. I'm going to go ahead and use my stitch markers, and I'm going to be kind of using them to secure the top to the back together so that they don't get off or uneven. I'll do that to this side. And I haven't woven in any ends yet. I like to do my sewing first so that I make sure that all of my ends that I weave in are on the inside of my sweater. So I went ahead and I secured these top sections. So I'm going to take one of these long ends, this long end that I have right here that's already connected. It's probably a little too long. I like to have one that's about twice, a little more than twice the length of where I'm sewing. So I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit shorter because it'll be, too hard to work with otherwise. So I'm going to go ahead and thread this yarn on my needle. And I'm going to go ahead and take out this first stitch marker. And I will insert this through both of the top loops. I'm just going to whip stitch it all the way across. Just holding it so that I stay nice and even. Not super concerned with being exact. Just holding it as evenly as possible. Oopsies. Oopsies, there we go. Okay, so I did that all the way across. And now I'll just kind of tie it off. There we go. And I'll probably go ahead and weave in this end while I have it on my yarn needle. Kind of hard to weave it through these V-stitches, but just, you know, find some places you can weave it in. I like to go a couple inches across my row. Pull it so it's not stretch it back out so it's not pulled tight. And then I'll go back across where I came from. Maybe go down a row. Make sure they're really secure because you'll probably be washing this since it is a garment. So make sure those ends are really secure in there and long enough so that if it does come out, you can weave it back in. You don't want to cut it short and then realize it's too short for you to weave back in and then you're stuck with this end. There we go. And then I'll weave in these other ones on this side as well so that when I flip it inside out, all of my ends are woven on the inside. So I'm going to go ahead and take this end over here, take one of my stitch markers and get it in the middle, just so I don't get off, and I make sure it's even across. And I'm going to repeat that right here as well. So I finished up my sewing and I wove in all those ends, and then I turned it right side out so that all the sewing and the ends that I wove in are all on the inside of my sweater.